Hey everyone, it's Allison. So April's been kind of a weird month of reading for me. A number of books that I expected to really love sort of fell a little flat, while others that I was a little bit hesitant about picking up actually worked pretty well for me. Overall, my reading felt a little bit slow this month, in part because of some of those that I had expected to really love and that didn't go quite as well as I had hoped. But there have been some books that I really loved this month, particularly audiobooks, so let's get into the reviews. First book that I read is called Hello Beautiful by Ann Napolitano. Now this was one of my most anticipated books of spring. I mentioned it in my previous video on the books that I was looking forward to this spring, and I had really high expectations for this book. There were so many readers that absolutely loved it. They couldn't stop raving about it, and honestly, it just did not work out as well as I had hoped for me. So William is this young man who loves basketball, and he's in college, and he meets this young woman named Julia, who kind of sets her sights on him and pulls him into the orbit of her family, which has 3 other sisters, and it's just this really loving, kind of joyful environment that he never experienced when he was a kid. His parents were dealing with a lot of grief right after his birth when his older sister died, and throughout his entire life they just kind of neglected and ignored him. So this was a totally new experience for William to be in this really happy, joyful family, and he loved it. But eventually his neglect and depression from it kind of catches up to him, and there's this big event, and it causes a rift in Julia's entire family. This book is actually kind of touted as an homage to Little Women, or kind of a retelling. So I was looking forward to that element because I am a big fan of Little Women, but honestly that aspect didn't work out so well for me either. I kind of get distracted by that whole aspect of it as I try to place the current book that I'm reading in with the events and the characters of the original work. And another thing that I found a little bit off-putting about this book is that the time periods felt off to me. So this is set in the 80s for the most part, but so many of the characters felt like they were living in the 50s or 60s, and I had to continuously reorient myself in time. Maybe that was just me, but the time periods just didn't feel like they gelled with the characters very well. Now this did actually redeem itself a little bit for me in the end. It kind of felt like it came into its own and the pace picked up a little bit for me. So I feel like I can safely recommend this, as particularly since so many other readers absolutely loved it. But again, for me, this was just not the winner I had hoped it would be. The next book that I read is called How to Keep House While Drowning: A Gentle Approach to Cleaning and Organizing by Casey Davis. Now I kind of picked this one up on a whim. I don't feel like I'm particularly drowning a lot, but I think like anybody else, I have struggles to keep up with certain things in my life, and I had heard that this was just a really interesting approach to keeping up with all of the sort of daily tasks of life, and I was really curious to check it out. So Casey Davis is a therapist who she shares content kind of across the internet and in her book on how to keep up with these daily things while struggling. And struggling can mean a lot of different things. It can mean neurodivergence, it can mean illness or trauma, depression or anxiety, or really just sort of general life struggles that kind of happen to everybody. It could also just mean a kind of lack of support where you just always kind of feel behind. So in her work, she's big on acknowledging the fact that all of these different struggles can make the very sort of mundane daily tasks of keeping life going, whether it's kind of caring for yourself or caring for your home, it can make them all feel difficult. And she also notes that these struggles are often kind of framed as a moral failing, which can lead to these shame spirals when people are already struggling to get through the day. One of her central messages in this book is that care tasks are morally neutral. We are not moral failures because we are having trouble completing these daily tasks of life. So throughout the book, she offers small tricks to help get through all of these tasks. They range from starting the task to doing just a little, to setting priorities, to kind of creating rhythms and routine that actually work for you. So what's great about this book, I don't think all of it will resonate with everybody. There are certainly things in here that didn't resonate with my own struggles, but I think we can all find something in here that we can relate to, that we struggle with on a day-to-day basis. My own personal struggle is always with task initiation. I am very susceptible to my own inertia, whether I am working or resting or reading or doing something else. It's very hard for me to switch tasks, especially when the task I need to switch to is something that I don't particularly enjoy. So my favorite tip that I use for everything from cleaning to working to exercise to writing is to start with extremely small chunks of time. I can do just about anything for 3 minutes, so I always start with like 3 minutes. And I tell myself, all I have to do is 3 minutes and then I'm done. And I convince myself of this. I almost always work for longer or exercise for longer. Telling myself that I only have to do 3 minutes is like key for me starting a lot of these tasks. So this is just one tip that I took from it, but there are tons of tips in here that she shares, no matter how you're struggling. A lot of people struggle with laundry. She has a whole lot of tips for laundry or dishes or self-care if hygiene for some reason is causing a problem for you. And none of it is presented with judgment, and it's all presented as very reasonable that because you are struggling, you could also be struggling with these tasks. So the other thing I loved about this book is actually the format of it. It's a very tiny book. It's very short. And all of the chapters are extremely short as well. They're very easy to read. I mean, you can read a chapter in 3 minutes or less. And she even provides little shortcuts through the content, guiding people who feel even too overwhelmed to read an entire book. So really anybody can find something helpful in this book, and I highly recommend it, even if you don't feel like you're completely overwhelmed by, the daily tasks of taking care of yourself or your house or your family. There are still some really great tips in here to make you feel better about any places where you might be falling short in those areas. So the next book that I read is called Happy Place by Emily Henry. Now, you've probably heard about this one. This is Emily Henry's new one, and she is obviously kind of the queen of beach reads after putting out her book called Beach Read a few years ago. One of the things that readers love about her is that she uses all of the tropes. She's great at putting them together in ways that really delight romance readers and even non-regular romance readers like me. And I love this one just as much as her previous books. Now, this is kind of a second chance romance, also a fake relationship romance book. And it's about Harriet and Wynne. They fell in love in college. They were kind of this perfect couple. They were engaged. But in this story, they both arrive at their friend's beach house, this place that their whole friend group goes every year for this amazing week-long vacation. And what their friends don't know is that 5 months prior, they had actually broken up. But when they get there, they learn that this is going to be the last trip to this beloved beach house because the father of one of the friends is actually selling the house. So it's kind of this heartbreaking realization for them, and they feel like they can't tell their friends that they've broken up. They need this to be one last perfect vacation for everybody. So they're kind of white-knuckling it through the week while not letting on that they've broken up. And Harriet is still struggling with why they broke up in the first place because it was kind of sudden and she doesn't really understand what happened. So they're trying to keep up the charade, but their chemistry is undeniable. It's a romance novel. So we're taken kind of back and forth through the start of their relationship and present day. And Henry just has this really wonderful way of writing romances that I think resonates with a lot of people. The characters in this one are particularly great. It has more of kind of a melancholy tone than a lot of her previous novels, which I really liked. I recently read some interviews with her where she talks about how she writes with just earnestness. And I think that's one thing that people really love about her novels. And it's one thing that I love about her novels. It kind of just feels like a big hug to sit down and read one of these every now and then. I did listen to this on audiobook. Julia Whalen narrated, and she, of course, is wonderful. So I highly recommend this one if you love a good beach read, love a good romance. Emily Henry, can't go wrong. Next book I read is Forget Me Not by Julie Soto. And this is another romance. Kind of unusual for me to have two in 1 month. I also listened to this one on audiobook, and it had dual narrators. They were Callie Dalton and Teddy Hamilton. This is sort of a second chance romance, also a little bit of a feel of enemies to lovers if you're kind of tracking your tropes. So it's about this woman named Emma, who is a wedding planner, and her ex named Elliot, who is kind of this grumpy florist. And Elliot had always kind of hated being a florist. It was a family business, and he kind of fell into it. Until he met Emma, who's very passionate about her work, and she brought kind of a lot of joy into his life. So they fell in love, but she ended up breaking his heart. Now, 2 years later, they're both working on this celebrity wedding that could really make or break their careers. And of course, their past and all of this kind of lingering chemistry kind of makes it difficult for them. So this kind of has an interesting format. It's told in alternating timelines, and 2 years prior is narrated by Elliot, and the present is narrated by Emma. So we kind of get two different perspectives on two different timelines. This back and forth format is pretty effective, especially on audio where the two narrators alternate. I really enjoyed listening to this one. I always kind of like romance on audio. It's easy to listen to, it's easy to follow. I will warn you, or perhaps this is an incentive if you like this, but this is a pretty spicy novel, so just a heads up if you're watching for that or you're trying to stay away from that. But I do recommend this one for fans of romance novels. The last one that I read is How to Think Like a Woman: 4 Women Philosophers Who Taught Me How to Love a Life of the Mind by Regan Penaluna. Now this one, honestly, I listened to it on audio, and I went into it kind of expecting that it maybe wouldn't work for me. I was interested in the topic, but I thought maybe it was one that I wouldn't finish. Regan Penaluna went into academia with these grand ideas about being a philosopher and joining the conversations with people who kind of explore life's deepest questions. But really what she found there was a lot of misogyny, not just kind of in the halls of the university, but really kind of embedded in the study of philosophy itself. And she found herself contending with both the male gaze that we're all kind of familiar with, but also what she calls the male glance, where the male philosophers that she worked with every day just kind of tended to ignore her views, ignore her work, ignore all of her accomplishments. So when she found this kind of obscure reference to this woman named Damaris Cudworth Masham, who was a contemporary of John Locke, she went down this rabbit hole of trying to unearth all of these obscure women philosophers who were on a quest to live a life of the mind as well. So in this book, she's looking at 4 women philosophers. She's got Masham, she's got Mary Estelle, Catherine Cockburn, and Mary Wollstonecraft. And she sort of examines both the stories of their lives as well as their philosophies. And the stories of these women can't really be separated from their philosophies because so many of the obstacles they faced just because they were women trying to enter this conversation shaped their ultimate philosophies and also shaped how Regan Penaluna ultimately pursued her own career, and her story is woven in as well. So story is really effective in this book. I am not a student of philosophy. I can kind of read it in short bites and be interested, but I tend to kind of lose interest in the topic. But the way that she wove the stories of herself and these women in really kept me interested throughout the entire audiobook. So I really recommend this to anybody who even has kind of a passing interest in this. The audiobook kept me engaged the whole time, and it's a nice entry into the topic for people like me who do not consider themselves well-versed in philosophy. So there you have it, a short list of books for me this month. Again, my reading felt a little bit slow this month. There were some surprises in there, but I'd love to know if you read any of these books, and if so, what you thought. If you haven't read any, are there any here that piqued your interest? Once again, thanks for watching.